At 04:17 a.m., a blizzard was the Smolensk Nuclear Power Plant's greatest shield. The swirling snow, a symbol of the unforgiving Russian winter, was supposed to make the 7.8 billion facility invisible. In less than 2 minutes, Ukrainian ingenuity would turn that blizzard into their most sophisticated weapon, using a tactic so bizarre it sounds like it was ripped from a science fiction manuscript. This wasn't just another strike. This was a calculated checkmate, a direct response to Russia's relentless attacks on Ukraine's power grid. The target wasn't the reactor itself. That would be madness. The target was a fatal flaw, a piece of Soviet-era arrogance cast in 500 feet of concrete, the exposed cooling tower for Unit 3. It was the plant's Achilles heel, and Ukraine was about to deliver a precision-guided arrow right into it. The operation was a symphony of asymmetric warfare, a swarm of 8 domestically produced AN-196 Lutia long-range drones guided by American-developed AI and communicating through Elon Musk's Starlink network. But they weren't alone. Deep inside Russian territory, hidden in the snow-dusted Desna forest, a small team of partisans was waiting to play the final, decisive notes. Guarding this crown jewel of the Russian energy sector was the S-400 Triumph, a billion-dollar air defense system designed to swat stealth bombers from the stratosphere. But Ukraine's entire plan was built around a simple, brutal truth. The S-400 is a champion prizefighter, and they were about to challenge it to a knife fight in a blizzard. Russia believed the winter was its ally. Ukraine was about to prove it could be forged into a weapon. At 01:09 a.m., the 368-mile journey began in absolute darkness. From a concealed airfield near Chernihiv, 8 AN-196 drones clawed their way into the night sky. These weren't multi-million-dollar predators. The Luti is a testament to wartime innovation, a low-cost composite-body drone that marries a simple airframe with an incredibly sophisticated brain. Each one carried a 165-pound custom thermite warhead, engineered to burn at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn steel into soup. They leveled off at a dangerously low 100 feet, a suicidal altitude for any conventional aircraft. But here, physics was their primary stealth coding. The simple curvature of the Earth created a radar horizon of about 15 miles. As long as they stayed low, they were ghosts, invisible to the powerful S-400 batteries scanning the horizon miles away. This was a dynamic hunt. The swarm's hive mind, in American-developed AI, was processing thousands of data points a second, communicating through an unjammable Starlink satellite link. But its most critical intelligence wasn't coming from space. It was coming from the ground. 35 miles from the Smolensk plant, 3 partisans huddled in a frozen dugout, their breath fogging in the frigid air. They were the swarm's eyes, using encrypted devices to feed the AI the real-time location of Russia's mobile Pantsir air defense units, the plant's last line of defense. They were painting a live map of the battlefield, allowing the AI to plot a course through the gaps in Russia's armor. But physics is a harsh mistress. A brutal 20-mile-per-hour crosswind began hammering the swarm from the west, a relentless force pushing them off course. The deviation was just 3.6 degrees, but projected over hundreds of miles, it was a mission-killing error. For any lesser system, the mission would have been over, the drones scattering uselessly into the Russian wilderness. For the Luti's AI, it was just another variable in a complex equation. It was no longer just following a map, it was thinking. This wasn't a drone following a pre-programmed Google Maps route. This was a Waymo self-driving car executing a combat mission in a hurricane. The AI made thousands of micro-adjustments to ailerons and throttle every second, fighting the wind, keeping the swarm locked on a perfect, deadly trajectory. Back in a darkened control room in Kyiv, a Ukrainian operator watched the telemetry stream, his knuckles white. The system was performing flawlessly. Then, as the swarm entered the final 50-mile stretch, a single icon on his screen flashed from green to red. The data feed from Drone 7, one of the primary strike assets, had just vanished. 72 seconds from the target zone, and one of his killers was flying completely blind. At 04:15, as the swarm crossed the 50-mile threshold, the entire electronic landscape erupted in fury. The S-400's 92N6E gravestone radar, a system so powerful it can track 300 targets simultaneously, lit them up like a Christmas tree. Inside the Russian command post, the system processed the threat with the cold, brutal efficiency of a Wall Street high-frequency trading algorithm. It assigned a target, calculated an intercept, and gave its human operators a single glowing green light: fire.
The response was instantaneous. A 40N6 missile, a 1.5-ton spear of high technology, roared into the sky, tearing a streak of white fire through the blizzard. Seconds later, a silent, expanding fireball blossomed in the darkness. The first drone was gone. In the command post, there was a momentary sigh of relief. A textbook kill.
The destroyed drone was Decoy 1. Its only purpose was to die spectacularly, confirming to the Russians that their system worked. And as its shattered pieces rained down, the remaining 7 drones executed their programmed response. They didn't scatter. They began a series of erratic, zigzagging maneuvers, an AI-choreographed ballet of evasion using the heavy falling snow as a 3-dimensional curtain. This is where the billion-dollar system began to fail. The S-400 was built to track fast, high-flying jets and ballistic missiles, predictable targets following the laws of physics. It wasn't designed to fight a swarm of slow, intelligent targets weaving through a blizzard like a flock of birds. The targeting icons for the remaining drones began to blink erratically on the Panzer operators' screens, the system's powerful brain struggling to maintain a lock through the chaos.
And on the ground, the final layer of Russian defense was completely oblivious. In a watchtower overlooking the Smolensk facility, a Russian guard, feeling the bite of the -15-degree cold, lit a cigarette to stay warm. He stared out into the darkness, seeing nothing but a wall of snow, completely unaware that 7 silent killers were now maneuvering just below his line of sight, closing in on the heart of Russia's power grid.
At 04:16 a.m., the critical question hung in the air of the Russian command bunker. Why was the S-400, a system that can track a baseball in low Earth orbit, struggling to lock onto a 550-pound drone? The answer wasn't a high-tech stealth coating. It was a Ukrainian pioneered tactic that military analysts are now calling snow jamming. The drones began broadcasting low-frequency interference, not at the radar itself, but into the storm. The heavy, wet snowflakes acted as millions of tiny, chaotic reflectors, scattering the S-400's powerful radar waves into an unreadable mess of noise. It's the electronic warfare equivalent of throwing a fistful of sand in your opponent's eyes. You don't block their vision, you overload it with useless information. The gravestone radar was drowning in ghosts. Blinded and furious, the Russian commanders unleashed their own electronic sledgehammer, the Krasuka 4. From 186 miles away, a mobile electronic warfare unit pumped out a tidal wave of energy, a brute force attack designed to fry the radio controls of any drone in the hemisphere. Any other drone system reliant on a radio link to a human pilot would have fallen from the sky, its brain instantly severed. But the Krasuka's raw power was completely useless against the Lutyi. It was like bringing a megaphone to a telepathy contest. You're shouting, but the drone isn't listening. It was connected directly to the Starlink satellite network, a digital conversation the Krasuka couldn't even hear, let alone interrupt. Just as the jamming wave hit, the partisans played their final card. They detonated a small IED, not on a road, but at a secondary radar relay station, physically severing its connection to the main grid. The explosion created the perfect cover for their real attack. They activated a ground-based beacon, a powerful encrypted transmitter providing a pinpoint-accurate navigation update directly to the swarm. The AI didn't need GPS anymore. It now had a digital lighthouse guiding it home through the storm. On paper, the S-400 should have won. Its technical specifications promised an 80% kill rate against conventional targets. But this wasn't a laboratory test. It was a real-world fight where Ukraine had turned Russia's greatest assets, its vast, unforgiving winter landscape, and its proximity to a porous border, into catastrophic weaknesses. The decoy's explosion had served its purpose, but it created an unexpected problem. The wind, which had been a nuisance, now became a saboteur.
It caught the thick, oily smoke from the destroyed drone and blew it directly into the path of the main swarm. The drone's optical sensors, suddenly blinded, triggered an immediate, instinctual course correction, sending two of them veering wildly off path. In that moment of chaos, the Russian commander played his final electronic card. He gave the order for a full-power, sector-wide barrage. For 30 agonizing seconds, every screen in the Kyiv control room went blank. The Starlink connection, the video feeds, the telemetry, all of it was drowned in a sea of Russian electronic warfare. The drones were completely, utterly on their own. But this is the exact scenario the system was built for. This is where the American-made AI, trained on 10,000 simulated flights through every conceivable combat scenario, took complete command. Disregarding the now useless optical and GPS data, the AI locked onto the partisan's ground beacon as its single source of truth. In less than a second, it replotted the attack run for the entire swarm, retasking drones to cover for the two that had gone astray. The mission was still on. The signal came back online in Kyiv, just in time for the operator to see the final desperate response. Realizing his electronic hammer had failed, the commander had unleashed the wolves. Two Su-35 fighters, the apex predators of the Russian Air Force, were screaming towards the target zone at Mach 2, their pilots' eyes scanning the ground for any sign of the intruders. This should have been the end. A multi-million-dollar fighter jet against a cheap composite drone is not a fair fight, but the drones had one last trick. They dropped altitude, diving into the 20-foot deep channel of the Desna River. The riverbanks provided a perfect natural shield, a blind spot in the Su-35's powerful look-down radar. The drones were flying inside the ground clutter, invisible. In the Smolensk command bunker, the commander stared at a screen that told him nothing. His billion-dollar shield had failed, his electronic hammer had missed, and now, somewhere in the blizzard, the ghosts were closing in on his most valuable asset. At 04:16:47 a.m., bursting from the cover of the Desna River, the four remaining strike drones began their final terminal attack run, 43 seconds to impact. Through the lead drone's camera, the target filled the screen. The Smolensk cooling tower, a 500-foot monument to Soviet neglect. The operator in Kiev could see the cracks in the aging concrete, the exposed rebar. But most importantly, he saw the fatal flaw the IAEA had warned about for years. Unlike modern Western designs, it had no reinforced containment dome. It was a giant, fragile concrete eggshell waiting to be cracked. On the ground, one last Panzer crew, ignoring the ghost signals on their main radar and using pure optical sights, achieved a lock. A final missile tore through the blizzard. Drone 6 vanished in a violent blast that shook the other drones in the air. A final, defiant kill. But it was too little, too late. The three remaining killers didn't even flinch. The AI hive mind instantly redistributed their attack vectors. In Kyiv, the operator held his breath, his own heart pounding in his ears. Below, the S-400 system was still screaming about phantom targets miles away, while Russian soldiers ran in confusion, not knowing if the threat was real or another electronic ghost. The final countdown began, 12 seconds. The drones adjusted their angle of attack, turning gravity into a weapon. 8 seconds. The concrete tower filled the entire screen. 3 seconds. The operator saw the individual cracks in the wall rush up to meet him. At precisely 04:17 a.m., the three remaining AN-196 drones executed their terminal dive. This wasn't a brute force attack, it was industrial neurosurgery. The first 165-pound thermite warhead slammed into the concrete wall of the cooling tower, precisely 3 feet from the central axis of the main water ventilation shaft. 2 more followed in less than a second, hitting different structural points on the same trajectory. This is where the mission's true genius was revealed. The fuse on each warhead was set with a 0.8-second delay. This was the critical detail. It ensured the warheads didn't just explode against the tower, but punched clean through the 2-foot-thick concrete wall before detonating inside. The result was a brutal physics lesson. The blast wave with a pressure of over 10 psi was trapped.
With nowhere to go, it slammed against the interior concrete walls, rebounding on itself and amplifying its destructive force. It turned the 500-foot tower into a giant sealed pressure cooker. The primary water pipes, the arteries of the plant's cooling system, were not just ruptured, they were vaporized. Deprived of its cooling liquid, the massive turbine for Unit 3 began to die. Its internal temperature spiked to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit in just 43 seconds. The good news for the world, the reactor's fail-safe systems worked perfectly, initiating an emergency cold shutdown that prevented a radioactive catastrophe. The bad news for Russia, the entire plant went dark, plunging 500,000 homes and military installations back into the very darkness Russia had tried to inflict on Ukraine. The initial repair bill was assessed at a staggering $150 million. 1 gigawatt of power vanished from the Russian grid. Thousands of miles above, a passing American intelligence satellite captured the entire event in high-resolution frames. The first frame showed an intact tower. The last showed a gaping, steaming hole where its heart used to be. The true impact wasn't measured in twisted steel. It was measured in the strategic paralysis that gripped the entire Russian Western Front. With its primary power source severed, the S-400 air defense shield protecting the border went blind for 72 critical hours. While Russia scrambled, Ukraine seized the initiative, increasing pressure on 8 different fronts. The hunter had become the hunted. The fallout quickly spread. The Smolensk plant was a major artery for Russian power exports. With 1 gigawatt of its output gone, the Kremlin was forced to cut 20% of its electricity supply to its key ally. This was a political humiliation and a financial disaster, costing Moscow a staggering $50 million a day in lost revenue. This cascade of failure landed on one desk in particular. In an emergency Kremlin meeting, a furious Vladimir Putin reportedly demanded an answer to a single question. How did 8 drones and 3 men in a forest do this to us? And that is the core lesson. The Russians had a multi-billion-dollar nuclear asset protected by a billion-dollar air defense system. Ukraine had 8 drones, a handful of partisans, and a deep understanding of their enemy's arrogance. They understood that the S-400, for all its power, was a brute force instrument designed to swat bombers from the sky, not to fight a thinking, decentralized swarm. And most importantly, they understood that Russia's greatest perceived strength, the brutal, unforgiving winter, could be turned against them. This battle wasn't won by the side with the most expensive hardware. It was won by the side clever enough to turn falling snow into an electronic warfare weapon. It was a victory for ingenuity over brute force, a testament to a new reality of warfare, where the winners aren't those with the biggest missiles, but those with the most disruptive ideas. Bye for now.